Hi there, my name's Liam and you may recognise me from Cheshire East Libraries, and today I've been very kindly asked to have a chat with you about one of my favourite authors, and I've chosen Stephen King. So I hope you enjoyed the video I've put together for you, and hopefully you'll take some really good book recommendations. Enjoy. Somehow, I don't feel the need to go into great detail introducing Stephen King, as I am certain that most of you have come across him in some shape or form, be it literature or film. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with Stephen King, he first came onto the literary scene in 1973 with the novella Carrie. Life could have taken a very different turn for King, as he initially gave up on the story and threw it in the bin. However, his wife Tabitha stepped in and encouraged King to continue writing the story and assisted him with capturing the female perspective, which was one of the aspects which prevented King from carrying on in the first place. Tabitha's intervention certainly paid off, with Carrie triggering a successful career for Stephen King, with publishers demanding more, and the director, Brian De Palma, wishing to adapt the text into one of horror's most iconic films with Sissy Spacek and Pippa Laurie. From there on, King would go on to produce some groundbreaking classics such as The Shining and develop a synonymous relationship with the silver screen, and he remains a prolific and relevant voice today. I mean, let's face it, we're practically living The Stand right now. I blame my dad. He is a fellow Stephen King fan, and he had the privilege of growing up in the 1980s when horror was at its peak and Stephen King was releasing some of his greatest masterpieces. When I was growing up, I used to stay up late with my dad and watch Hammer horrors, the Vincent Price flicks, and all the staple horror classics. And it was this bond which ignited my interest in the Gothic, and it was through film that I actually discovered Stephen King and wanted to read his work. I can't remember which was the first film that inspired this light bulb moment. I'd like to say that it was perhaps the television film Rose Red, but what I do recall is that my dad was absolutely delighted when he discovered I was interested in reading one of his favourite authors. Whenever we'd visit libraries or bookshops, he'd always point me towards a Stephen King book and explain to me why I would not be disappointed for reading it. So I can hand on heart say my pocket money was always well spent. In a weird way, the tables have now reversed, where I'm recommending my dad some of Stephen King's latest offerings, and for that reason I really do appreciate the common ground that the author inspired between us, as there is certainly never a time when Stephen King's name isn't mentioned whenever we catch up. I suppose he's a bit like a McDonald's. I know he's unhealthy for you, but I have to say his fiction tastes irresistibly good. For me, he's just one of those tried and tested authors that always sparks joy. Whenever I feel run down after a heavy read, or I've encountered a slog of bad reading choices, I always know that when I turn to Stephen King, when I close one of his books, I'll always feel fulfilled and I will be ready to enjoy the pleasure of reading again. I love his writing style and he never fails to shock me. Only Stephen King could come up with the ideas that he presents the reader with. Favourite quote? Books are a uniquely portable magic. King is strongly associated with the horror genre, there's no doubt about that. After all, he is titled the Master of Horror. However, I do feel it is very misguided to trap him solely with the Gothic, as he has proven he can write other genres such as domestic thrillers, fantasy and hard-boiled detective fiction. I particularly enjoyed King's contribution to environmentalist fiction in 2009 with Under the Dome, which explored how a small town might cope if it was cut off from basic resources such as water and electricity. And it was an excellent forewarning to the dangers that global warming may bring. Believe me, there is more to King than blood, guts and gore. I promise. I would say Needful Things, as I love the premise of it. Leyland Gaunt, a stranger to Castle Rock, sets up a new shop in the town. The shop is called Needful Things and it specialises in collectibles and antiques. And every unsuspecting local who visits the shop miraculously seems to encounter an item they need in their lives, from a missing baseball card to a special healing charm. Often the value of such items is out of their budget. However, they can receive their needful thing in exchange for a prank or a mysterious deed by the request of Leyland Gaunt. As Gaunt charms the locals one by one with his devious tricks, fractions begin to develop within the town, and it is up to Sheriff Pangborn to resolve the disruption and uncover the truth behind Gaunt's enchanting facade. And to me, this showcases King's storytelling craft at its very best. If you're a serial reader, then I would highly recommend you check out the Cat and Mouse trilogy, Mr. Mercedes, which follows a hard-boiled detective's connection with a mass murderer. And I would also recommend you check out the Dark Tower series, which combines tropes of Tolkien, Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, and some of the trademark characteristics of King's fiction. I have a backlog of his books I still need to tick off the list, as I don't want to consume his fiction all at once. I keep reading his work because I admire the quirky concepts that he conjures up, and by his own admittance, a lot of them stem from what-if scenarios. For instance, what if a murderous car comes to life? What if our mobile phones infect us with a deadly disease? Or, what if a time traveller could prevent the assassination of JFK? And I just love tapping into the author's mind and wondering, where do these strange ideas transpire from? Stephen King suggests the best way to concentrate on his writing is to close the door to the world and listen to AC/DC in the background. And in tribute to his favourite band, King asked AC/DC if they would provide the soundtrack to his film Maximum Overdrive, and you can find the tracks featured in that film in their album Who Made Who. I would say Johnny Smith from The Dead Zone, a retired school teacher who ends up in a 4-year coma after a major car accident. When Johnny wakes up, he discovers he's developed psychic superpowers. By the slightest touch of a person, he can see into their future. These powers prove to be useful when Johnny is asked to assist the police on a homicide case. However, it is an exchange of handshakes with popular Senator Greg Stilson which challenges the protagonist's abilities, as he discovers that Stilson will lead America down a dark path into nuclear war. But how do you prevent it when you're the only witness to this future? And it is this moral dilemma which makes Johnny Smith one of King's most captivating and complex characters. There are so many to choose from. Even the weaker ones have their own little charm. But for me, you can't beat Misery. Kathy Bates as Annie Wilkes cemented her status as my favourite actress after watching that film. The chemistry she shared with James Caan could never be mirrored again if they were ever to remake it. The film is reasonably close to the book and metaphorically reflects King's frustrations being tied to the horror genre and not being well received by the critics whenever he changed direction. And I don't know about you at home, but that scene where Kathy Bates wields the sledgehammer still gives me the EBGBs today. I'm yet to do it, but I would like to take a trip to Colorado to visit the Stanley Hotel, known for its paranormal activity and also inspiring the setting for The Shining. Being an avid reader of King has encouraged me to conduct academic research outside of work on the Gothic, and his work very often draws upon past influences from the horror genre. For example, Pet Sematary plays with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein myth, and Salem's Lot is a reimagining of Bram Stoker's Dracula within America. With these influences so apparent, King stimulates you to revisit these foundational pieces which have inspired his work and his contemporaries. I also acknowledge Stephen King's writing as a major influence into my interest in creative writing. Nothing properly has surfaced yet, but I am very drawn to writing about the supernatural. In fact, my girlfriend very often says to me, "Ooh, I'm not sure my grandma would like to sit and read that." So perhaps I should take a leaf out of King's book and throw away an unfinished manuscript and see if that works for me. When Stephen King was at the height of his game in the 1980s, the likes of James Herbert and Dean Koontz were considered his greatest rivals. But I would also encourage you to have a look at the work of Clive Barker, who on numerous occasions King has publicly endorsed, and also try out his son, Joe Hill, who is proving to be an upcoming contemporary voice for the horror genre. I would also encourage you to check out his 2 non-fiction books, the first being Danse Macabre and the second on writing, where he details some of the reading material which influenced his ideas from Edgar Allan Poe to H.P. Lovecraft. With the book Dr. Sleep, King had demonstrated that he could revisit some of his previous worlds. In that case, it was Danny Torrance and the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. With that in mind, I would perhaps like to see King return to the psychologically disturbed Annie Wilkes from Misery. However, King does tend to reflect on modern fears, and I do believe that perhaps the global pandemic and the recent divisions in American society will influence some of his next ideas. For Christmas, I received King's latest short story collection, If It Bleeds, and I am particularly drawn to the tale Rat, which explores a struggling writer who ends up making a pact with a rat to overcome his issues. But somehow, with King, you know that this Faustian bargain is going to have detrimental consequences. Thanks ever so much for tuning in to today's Author I Love video. I hope you picked up some interesting facts, some great book recommendations, And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about Stephen King, so feel free to drop us a comment below. In the meantime, look after yourselves and stay tuned for some more Author I Love recommendations from our Cheshire East Libraries team soon. Take care. Bye.